Imagine the ultimate awkward scenario. Like the cameras are flashing, the crowd just completely freezes, and this incredibly uncomfortable silence settles over a first-class cabin.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare.
Right, you are totally trapped. You haven't just run into an ex at the grocery store where you can, quickly duck behind the cereal aisle.
Yeah, you can't just abandon your cart and run.
No, you are stuck in a metal tube 30,000 feet in the air with absolutely nowhere to hide for 6.5 hours.
I mean, it is the definition of a captive environment.
Yeah.
The social pressure of a confined space like that, it just amplifies every single micro-expression.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are pulling from a fascinating stack of sources today to unpack a story that, well, it recently set the internet on fire.
It really did.
We've got a blend of recent celebrity reporting from TMZ, In Touch, Bustle, and E! News, and we are crossing that with historical documentation of early 2000s reality TV, recent social media commentary, and this is the wild part, an incredibly detailed excerpt from a 2008 Loyola of Los Angeles Entertainment Law Review.
Yeah, blending tabloid reporting with, dense academic legal analysis provides such a unique lens.
Exactly.
We aren't just looking at a celebrity encounter here. We're looking at the legal and cultural machinery that, makes that encounter a global spectacle.
Our mission today is to unpack a viral 2026 celebrity run-in, explore the intense reality TV history that originally manufactured their fame, and examine the actual legal boundaries of celebrity privacy.
Which were probably very different than what most people assume.
Oh, completely. And finally, we're going to look at how public scrutiny has fundamentally evolved. We have moved from physical paparazzi hiding in the bushes to digital surveillance powered by everyday people.
It serves as this fascinating case study. It tracks how our culture consumes private lives and how the rules of that consumption just, shift beneath our feet.
And while the inciting incident we're talking about today is undeniably juicy, the way it connects to a massive legal battle over helicopter rescues and constitutional rights, that's a twist nobody saw coming.
Yeah, the through line here reveals the profound friction between society's desire to know everything and an individual's right to keep anything hidden.
So let's set the stage with a shocking headline. On March 29th, 2026, 20 years after their highly publicized divorce, Nick Lachey and Jessica Simpson ended up on the exact same flight from Los Angeles to Kauai, Hawaii.
Just consider the statistical anomaly of that moment alone.
Right.
LAX processes tens of millions of passengers a year, yet these two specific individuals end up assigned to the same narrow stretch of real estate for a flight across the Pacific.
It's crazy. And the initial narrative that hit the internet was highly cinematic. TMZ published an exclusive report painting this picture of intense, bitter tension.
Of course they did.
Right. According to their sources, Nick turned, quote, bright red the second he realized Jessica was on board.
Wow.
The report claimed there was zero interaction and that Jessica made her intentions crystal clear by actively switching seats with someone in her group to avoid him.
That specific framing is so telling. The media instantly fell back on a familiar script. Two famous exes, lingering resentment, and dramatic evasive maneuvers at 30,000 feet.
It's basically a movie scene.
Exactly. It's a narrative designed for maximum engagement because it plays on our collective memory of their very public fallout.
And the tabloids added layers to really heighten that tension. Nick's wife, Vanessa, was on board. Jessica's estranged husband, Eric Johnson, was also on the flight, but supposedly sitting in coach while Jessica was up in first class.
Right. It read like a script for a soap opera.
But when we synthesize the follow-up reporting from In Touch Weekly, E! News, and Bustle, the mechanics of that flight look radically different, don't they?
Oh, completely. The reality is far more mundane and, frankly, far more human.
Yeah, Nick actually clarified the situation during a May 13 appearance on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen. It turns out there was no mid-air Cold War.
Not at all.
He described the 6.5-hour flight as, quote, strangely okay. He noted that while they were in the same vicinity in first class, everyone involved was very cordial, very respectful.
And honestly, the logistics alone diffuse the drama. When you look at the passenger manifest based on his account, you realize this wasn't some intimate, tense standoff.
No, it was basically a massive movement of two blended families.
Exactly.
Let's break down that manifest, because you're right, the sheer numbers changed the context entirely. Nick was traveling with his wife of 14 years, Vanessa, and their 3 kids, Camden, who is 13, Phoenix, 9, and Brooklyn, 11.
That's 5 people right there.
And Jessica was traveling with her mom, Tina, And her estranged husband, Eric Johnson, was indeed on the flight, seated elsewhere with their 3 kids, Maxwell, 14, Ace, 12, and Birdie, 7.
So managing 6 children, spouses, and extended family across different cabin classes requires immense coordination.
I can't even imagine.
Right. The idea that anyone had the bandwidth to orchestrate a dramatic silent feud while handling the logistics of family travel, it's highly improbable.
Yeah.
The adults simply acted like adults.
It perfectly illustrates how the media machinery operates. It's like playing a game of telephone where we sat quietly reading magazines and handled our kids. Turns into a brutal mid-air standoff by the time it reaches your feed.
Yeah, and to understand the velocity of that transformation and, why the public is still so invested in this specific couple 20 years later,
Right.
we have to look back.
Right, at their foundational role in pop culture.
Exactly. They didn't just participate in the celebrity ecosystem, they really helped build its modern architecture.
So, going back to our Us Weekly and Wikipedia sources, Nick and Jessica's history is essentially the blueprint for modern reality television. They met in 1998. Jessica was only 18, and they were navigating the absolute peak of the boy band craze.
With Nick touring heavily in 98 Degrees.
Exactly. And the industry ecosystem in the late 90s was entirely different from today. Fame was highly centralized, completely controlled by record labels and massive media conglomerates.
And the pressure placed on them from the beginning was immense. You had Jessica's father and manager, Joe Simpson, openly disapproving of their 7-year age gap.
Which created immediate public friction.
Yeah, and we also had to look at how personal narratives were monetized. Jessica had made a public vow to save herself from marriage.
Oh, yes. The media latched onto that with a relentless grip. During their joint interviews, journalists constantly grilled them about her virginity.
Which is so invasive to think about now.
It really is. It wasn't just a personal choice anymore. It became an active storyline packaged and sold to the American public.
And that constant commodification of their private lives laid the groundwork for MTV's Newlyweds, Nick and Jessica, which ran from 2003 to 2005.
That show totally shifted the cultural landscape.
It did. It moved the camera from the stage right into the living room.
And it produced one of the most defining moments in television history. I mean, in the very first episode, Jessica is eating out of a bowl and asks Nick, "Is this chicken what I have, or is this fish? I know it's tuna, but it says chicken of the sea."
Oh, the classic chicken of the sea moment.
Yes, it played directly into the dumb blonde trope. And while it seems trivial now, it turned them into global superstars literally overnight.
What is really fascinating is the psychological mechanism behind that moment. In her memoir, Open Book, Jessica analyzed her own behavior during that era.
And she had a great phrase for it, right?
Yeah, she coined the phrase that she had Instagram girlfriend syndrome before it was a thing.
Wow.
She was acutely aware of the cameras and desperately wanted to project a flawless fairy tale to the audience.
She actually wrote that she didn't mind looking foolish or, playing the punchline as long as people saw the perfection in Nick.
Which is heartbreaking, really.
It is. It was a conscious sacrifice of her own image to protect the brand of their marriage.
But that level of constant performance creates an unsustainable psychological burden. You are no longer living a marriage. You are producing one.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And the gap between the messy reality of two humans trying to build a life together and the polished narrative demanded by millions of viewers, it eventually causes the structure to collapse.
And the sources confirm that toll. The pressure cooker of the show and the relentless media scrutiny contributed heavily to their split in 2005 and their divorce in 2006. In a 2020 Bustle article, Jessica summarized the experience with striking clarity. She said, quote, "We really got crushed by the media and by ourselves."
It is a profound acknowledgement of dual responsibility. They were victims of an invasive system, but they also willingly participated in the mechanisms of that system.
Fortunately, both managed to extract themselves, heal, and find stable footing. Nick actually weaponized those past scars for something positive recently.
Or on the Netflix show.
Yeah. He and Vanessa host The Ultimatum, and he actively uses his own highly public divorce to advise the contestants, urging them not to let their past mistakes dictate their future.
It's a great pivot. But, the media crush Jessica described wasn't merely a metaphor for emotional pressure.
No, it wasn't.
As the 2000s progressed, the demand for celebrity imagery escalated, and that crush became violently, physically dangerous.
And to understand how that happened, we have to look at the legal architecture that allowed it. If you're enjoying this deep dive, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming investigations. Because Honestly, the legal reality of paparazzi culture is shocking.
It really is. The 2008 Loyola of Los Angeles Entertainment Law Review provides a stark look at the financial incentives driving this behavior.
Yeah, the author opens with a scenario that reads like a suspense novel. Imagine you're in a secluded public park, just playing frisbee with your kids. It feels entirely private.
Just a normal afternoon.
Exactly. But hanging from a tree branch 250 yards away, completely obscured in camouflage gear, is a photographer using military-grade telephoto lenses to capture your every move.
And the motivation for that level of surveillance is purely economic. The law review highlights that while a standard red carpet photo might yield a moderate payout, an exclusive, candid shot of a celebrity's private life can generate massive wealth.
Oh, yeah. The first pictures of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's baby, for instance, were estimated to be worth $500,000.
$500,000, it's wild.
When you introduce a $500,000 bounty for a single photograph, you stop getting photographers and start getting bounty hunters.
And the tactics absolutely reflect that shift. The law review details deeply disturbing incidents, like a paparazzo intentionally ramming their vehicle into Lindsay Lohan's car to provoke a reaction and secure a photo.
That's literally assault.
Or photographers forcing Angelina Jolie into a high-speed pursuit through red lights just because she was attempting to visit a toy store.
Which forces the obvious question. How does the United States legal system permit this? If a normal citizen stalked someone through red lights, they would be arrested. Why does holding a camera grant immunity?
Well, it stems from a profound tension within the U.S. Constitution. The First Amendment's protection of a free press frequently collides with an individual's right to privacy.
Right.
Historically, American jurisprudence heavily favors the press, operating on the philosophy that a robust, unhindered media acts as an essential watchdog for democracy, stimulating public debate.
I understand protecting journalists who are, uncovering political corruption, but California specifically tried to address the entertainment side of this, didn't they? The law review discusses California Civil Code section 1708.8.
Yes, they did. In 1998, recognizing the escalation in these aggressive tactics, California enacted a statute creating liability for, quote, constructive invasion of privacy. The intent was to penalize photographers who use visual or auditory enhancing devices like extreme zoom lenses or directional microphones to capture private moments that would otherwise require physical trespassing.
But I'm reading the breakdown of this statute, and there is a gaping structural flaw in how it assigns blame.
There is. It all comes down to the legal concept of agency and independent contractors. To hold a deep-pocketed publisher like a major tabloid magazine liable under this law, the celebrity plaintiff has to prove that the publisher specifically directed, solicited, or induced the photographer to commit the invasion.
Wow. So the publishers just operate as a secondary market.
Exactly.
They can just tell the courts, hey, we never hired this person to stalk anyone. We merely purchased a compelling photograph that an independent freelancer brought to us after the fact.
That is the exact mechanism. By treating the paparazzi as independent contractors, the publishers build a legal firewall.
That's incredibly frustrating.
They extract all the financial benefit from the invasive photos, while completely shielding themselves from the liability of how those photos were obtained. Celebrities are just left trying to sue individual freelancers who often lack the assets to make a lawsuit worthwhile.
And the law review dives into a landmark California Supreme Court decision that pushes this legal theory to its absolute limit, right? Shulman v. Group W Productions.
Yes.
This case is devastating, but it perfectly maps the boundaries of American privacy law.
The facts of Shulman are just tragic. Ruth Shulman and her family were involved in a catastrophic car accident on a California highway.
Sure.
The vehicle overturned, trapping them inside, and emergency responders actually had to use the jaws of life to extract them.
It is arguably the most vulnerable, terrifying moment a human being could experience.
Absolutely.
And during this rescue, a medical helicopter arrives. But riding inside that helicopter is a camera operator for a reality television program called On Scene, Emergency Response. The flight nurse was even wearing a wireless microphone.
Yeah, they captured the entire extraction and the subsequent medical transport. And then the network broadcast this footage to the public.
Which is just wild to me.
It gets worse.
Mm.
During the broadcast, viewers could clearly hear Mrs. Shulman, who was left paraplegic by the accident, pleading with the nurse, saying, "I just want to die. I don't want to go through this."
Oh my God. To have your most private trauma packaged as entertainment is unfathomable. So she sued the production company for invasion of privacy.
She did.
I want to look closely at the two specific claims she made because the court's handling of them reveals so much about where the line is drawn.
Right, so she brought a claim for unlawful intrusion, targeting the actual recording of the event, and a claim for public disclosure of private facts, which targeted the television broadcast itself.
Okay, so on the first claim, the intrusion, the court drew a very specific spatial boundary. They determined she had no reasonable expectation of privacy while trapped in a car on a public highway.
Because it's a public space.
Exactly. However, they ruled that once she was loaded into the rescue helicopter, the environment changed. The helicopter acts as a mobile hospital room, granting her an objective expectation of privacy.
Makes sense. But the second claim, regarding the broadcast of the footage, is where the First Amendment really flexed its muscle.
How does a court possibly justify broadcasting a private citizen's medical emergency?
The California Supreme Court ruled against Mrs. Schulman on the broadcast claim. They determined that the footage was newsworthy as a matter of law.
Newsworthy.
Yes. The judicial reasoning was that the public possesses a legitimate interest in observing how emergency medical services operate and how accident victims are treated.
Wow.
That broader public interest superseded her individual right to keep her trauma private.
Let's consider the implications of that logic. If the courts define newsworthy broadly enough to cover a tragic accident for the sake of educating the public on rescue operations, how do tabloids use that same defense for publishing a photo of a celebrity buying groceries?
Exactly the problem.
Like, how does a photo of an actor drinking coffee serve the public interest or stimulate democratic debate?
Well, the author of the Loyola Law Review argues aggressively against this standard. The critique is that American courts have allowed newsworthiness to degrade from a standard of civic importance into a catch-all shield for mere public curiosity.
If the public wants to see it, the courts deem it newsworthy.
Precisely. And the article provides a sharp contrast by looking across the Atlantic at European law.
Right, the legal philosophy in Europe diverged dramatically, particularly in the wake of Princess Diana's death in 1997 following a paparazzi pursuit.
Under the European Convention on Human Rights, the courts apply a much stricter balancing test.
We see this clearly in cases involving Princess Caroline of Monaco. The European courts establish a rigorous distinction between an individual performing official public duties and that same individual engaging in their daily private life.
Yeah, in the European framework, satisfying public curiosity or boosting magazine circulation is insufficient to justify invading privacy. They actually balance freedom of expression against the right to respect for private life, treating them as co-equal rights.
Whereas in the United States, the First Amendment is treated as an apex right that almost always overrides privacy concerns.
Which explains why the American paparazzi industry became an unstoppable force.
But if we bring this narrative all the way back to our 2026 flight to Hawaii, we see that the threat model has completely changed.
It really has.
Celebrities aren't just hiding from telephoto lenses anymore. They're navigating a world of inescapable, decentralized surveillance.
The professional paparazzo has been largely replaced, or at least augmented, by the general public. Everyone with a smartphone is now a node in a global surveillance network.
And our Primetimer source highlights this shift perfectly. While the tabloids tried to manufacture drama about Nick and Jessica interacting, the internet audience found something completely different to hyperfixate on.
Oh, yeah. They didn't care about the pop culture history at all. They cared about the seating arrangement.
Right. The flight triggered this massive, vicious online debate about parenting etiquette and the ethics of cabin class separation.
It's wild. Based on the passenger manifest, Jessica and her mother sat in first class, while her estranged husband sat with their 3 kids, ages 14, 12, and 7, in a different section of the plane.
And social media users immediately began attacking this decision. They aggressively debated whether parents should ever enjoy a premium cabin while their children sit in a lower class.
It's fascinating to observe how the locus of judgment has shifted. The critique no longer comes from a magazine editor. It comes from the everyday traveler sitting in row 12.
Exactly. And the Primetimer article brought in Josephine Hunt, a recognized parenting coach, to provide actual analysis rather than reactive judgment.
What did she say?
Well, I found her perspective incredibly grounding. She completely dismantled the idea that there is a universal rule for this. She explained that the decision to separate seating shouldn't be based purely on age, but rather on a child's emotional preparedness, their baseline resilience, and their accumulated travel experience.
That's a very nuanced developmental approach.
Yeah, Hunt emphasizes that building independence in children requires introducing challenges, but those challenges must be calibrated and paired with appropriate support.
That makes perfect sense. Like a 14-year-old who flies internationally every month might view sitting in coach with their siblings as an adventure,
Right.
but a 7-year-old taking their very first flight might experience severe anxiety without a parent right next to them.
Exactly. But the internet jury does not possess that context, nor do they seek it out.
They rarely do.
They perceive a famous family, they identify a parenting choice that differs from their own, and they immediately prosecute the parents in the court of public opinion.
And the irony here is profound when you look at the timeline. 20 years ago, Nick and Jessica's lives were scrutinized by MTV producers shaping a narrative, and professional photographers hunting for a massive payday.
The financial incentive drove the intrusion back then.
Right. But today, the intrusion is driven by social currency. The person sitting across the aisle doesn't want a check from a tabloid. They want the dopamine hit of a viral tweet.
Yes.
The public sphere has expanded infinitely, making every public space a potential broadcast studio.
We have essentially crowdsourced the paparazzi.
We really have.
We've tracked an incredible evolution today. We started with a sensationalized headline about two exes crossing paths on a flight. We trace that back to the early days of reality TV, where the concept of monetizing private lives was first perfected.
Then we explored the harsh legal realities of the First Amendment, examining how courts prioritize the concept of newsworthiness over personal trauma, enabling the aggressive paparazzi culture of the 2000s.
And finally, we arrived at the modern era of digital surveillance, where the general public has adopted the invasive tactics they use to criticize. It demonstrates that our consumption of celebrity culture is really just a mirror reflecting our own shifting boundaries. We demand empathy for ourselves in our daily struggles, but we ruthlessly strip it away from anyone we recognize from a screen.
And that evolution leaves us with a critical and perhaps chilling question to consider.
Oh, definitely.
The American legal system struggles to protect high-profile individuals because it classifies their existence as inherently newsworthy. But as everyday people increasingly live their lives out loud on social media, broadcasting their locations, their families, and their routines,
Yeah.
at what point does the average citizen forfeit their own right to privacy, simply because the internet algorithm suddenly finds their life entertaining?
That is a deeply unsettling thought to mull over the next time you are sitting in a terminal or trapped in a metal tube, scrolling through your feed and judging a stranger's choices. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If this exploration shifted your perspective today, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next investigation into the hidden mechanics of the stories we consume. Stay curious, and we will catch you next time.